I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Gold Hill Planning Commission, Wednesday, June 18th, 2025 at 6:00 PM. Can we have roll call, please?
Chair Warwick,
Here.
Vice Chair Schoonover,
Excused.
Commissioner Hammond, Commissioner Lilly,
Present.
Counselor Berggren.
Present.
Next on the agenda, public comment. This will be general comments unrelated to the public hearing for this evening. And I don't see that we have any.
For the hearing, right? Not general comments. You wanted to talk on the topic.
Which is the House Bill.
Yeah.
395.
Yeah. Okay.
Not that I want to talk about it,
That,
but as I want to know when, but.
so there's no public comment at this time.
Okay. Next on the agenda, minutes approval from the January 15th and April 16th Planning Commission meetings. I'm assuming the commissioners had an opportunity to review those. And if we have a motion to approve.
A motion to approve?
Second. They've been moved and seconded. Roll call.
Chair Warwick,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schoonover. Oh, sorry, he is excused. Commissioner Hammond.
Yeah.
Do you approve?
Hard time understanding you.
Do you approve the motion to approve the minutes? And Commissioner Lilly,
Approve.
motion passes.
Okay. New business. At this time at 6:02 PM, we will open the public hearing to accept public testimony regarding the proposed text amendment to adopt new language in the City of Gold Hill Municipal Code Titles 16 subdivisions and 17 zoning to ensure compliance with House Bill 3395, promote internal consistency within the code, and incorporate Ordinance 1302, low impact development, into the municipal code. The applicant is the City of Gold Hill. This meeting of the Gold Hill Planning Commission will be conducted according to the Gold Hill Comprehensive Plan and applicable ordinances, as well as those of the state of Oregon as they apply to legislative actions. A summary of the rules is as follows. The planning staff will identify and explain the laws and procedures governing this action. For legislative hearings, the applicable criteria are: number one, the proposal shall be consistent with the city's adopted goals and policies pertaining to land use, growth, and development. Number two, the proposal shall be consistent with all applicable statewide planning goals. These are the criteria that the Planning Commission must use in making a decision. All testimony and evidence must be directed toward these criteria or others as applicable in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation which the person testifying believes to be relevant to these hearing issues. When offering testimony, please relate your presentation to the listed criteria. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the applicants an opportunity to respond to the issue shall preclude appeal to the Oregon State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. All participants are free to express their views about whether the proposed legislation is good policy or appropriate use of city resources. Any person who participates in this hearing may receive a mailed notice of the Planning Commission's final decision by requesting the notice in writing. All persons testifying shall have 3 minutes unless the chair grants additional time at the request of the speaker. Any time spent answering questions from the commission will not be considered as part of the speaker's allotted time. Each person offering comments during this hearing must state his or her name and address and write that same information on the sign-up sheet found on the table. We wish to hear from everyone who is interested in the proposal. However, we request that you do not infringe on someone else's speaking time by repeating evidence already provided. The laws and procedures applicable to this legislative item shall be presented by the Rogue Valley Council of Governments planning staff as part of this staff report. We will begin the hearing with a staff report, statements by persons in favor of the application, statements by person in opposition to the application, and an opportunity for additional comments by staff. After final comments from staff, the public comment portion will be closed and the matter will be discussed and acted upon by the Planning Commission. This hearing is in addition to the required City Council hearing to provide an additional opportunity to accept written and oral testimony in advance of the City Council hearing. The written testimony in the minutes of this meeting will be provided to the City Council prior to their meeting as part of the record. Is there anyone present who wishes to challenge the authority of the Planning Commission to take testimony in this manner? No, there are no objections. Do any commissioners wish to abstain from participating in this hearing or declaring a conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest? No. Ex parte contact. This is a legislative action, not quasi judicial, so ex parte contact is not applicable. We will now begin with the staff report. Dick Converse, can you please present the staff report?
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Present.
Chair. As noted, this is a code amendment that we're looking at, and it covers a number of issues for the city. Some of it is directly related to House Bill 3395, but much of it, through my returning to work at the COG, we talked about that last time, I've been looking at various cities' codes to see, number one, whether they are complying with this new rule. But then when you have had ordinances updated, often there's leftover language that needs to be fixed. You end up with contradictory provisions. And so while my main intent is the couple of items relating to 3395, there are other updates that just make things clearer. I think the one that probably has the most practical effect is the update of the mobile food vendor code. It caused a little bit of confusion the way it was written, and there are some provisions we want to fix. Am I not close enough? I'm sorry. That and a cold. Oops. Okay, I'll move this up so I don't go cross-eyed. Is that better? Thank you. I'm sorry. So I'll go into the report. I'm going to read it verbatim. I think that's an insult to councils when people do that. But I have identified some of the page numbers so that it's a little bit easier to find what I'm talking about too. As I mentioned, there's the need to comply with House Bill 3395. This was adopted in 2023, and it has a bunch of provisions, but most of them relate to communities that are larger than 2,500 people. So there's only a couple that I identified that Gold Hill has to do, and I'm really not sure what the long-term effect will be because they're not particularly popular items, but the city has to allow them if the property owner wants to apply. Much of the legislation is, I can understand the audience's concern because it's in mandatory language. It says the city shall allow. It's not may allow, like most legislation has been in the past. But what the state has really developed a concern about is the lack of affordable housing and even the sheer lack of housing. We're way behind in the amount of housing that should be provided on an annual basis. So this is one of the ways of addressing that. They're looking at various options that communities might approve. One thing that is mentioned in the code or in the House bill is emergency housing. And that can create some concerns too, because that's basically housing for homeless and people who are in distress. But it is not part of the code. It's something that just goes to council and is not a land use action, oddly enough. So that would be handled through another provision. And then there's another House bill that says that if somebody is doing a large project or any kind of project, they can ask for a bunch of adjustments to the ordinance. It says you have to do this, but you can ask for up to 10 adjustments. But that is also not being plugged into the code because it sundowns in 2023 and 2032, excuse me. And the advice to the communities is not to include that in the code. So those are not part of what we're proposing tonight. What we are looking at is affordable residential structures in commercial zones. That's on page 59 of the packet. And that states that affordable housing has to be permitted in conjunction with an existing building. It allows residential use of portions of existing structures. It
Okay, do
doesn't-
you want me to have I'm sorry to interrupt.
If you could pull that up, that'd be.
Do you want me to have the pages as you're having them go through, or do you want me at the staff report?
Well, we could come back with detail later, probably.
Well, I
If-
want to just make sure that I have on the screen what you would like to
Yeah.
have on the screen as you're presenting.
Okay, it's going to be kind of jumping around if you have to keep going from page to page, but that one will be 59.
Okay, let's see.
There we go. Yes. And this is taken directly from the House bill. There's nothing that I've modified in the language. And it says within an urban growth boundary, it requires a affordable housing covenant, which basically really limits the people who can occupy to less than 60% of the area median income, which is a pretty low bar. So it's not going to be housing for just people who want extra housing. And the next page says that it doesn't. One thing it doesn't require is an economic analysis, which is interesting. But it doesn't also apply on lands that it can't be adequately served by water, sewer, storm drainage, streets. Right now, we have serious issues with water. It can't be on steep slopes. It can't be in a floodplain. So there's a lot of limitations as to where this can go. And yet it is mandated to be in the code. So while it's there, I would be surprised to see very much effect from that. The other one is for single room occupancies in residential zones. And I just have that in the definitions because it's a form of single family or residential. So I've got it listed under dwelling types. I put it in another section, which I misnumbered. It needs to be in there only once. But it's a curious code. I'll just read the part of it rather than going to the page right now. They can allow up to 6 units on each lot or parcel that would otherwise allow a single family dwelling. 6 units. But they must share sanitary facilities and food preparation facilities. And in the multifamily zones, it would be the number of units that the zone would allow. It's language that I'm uncomfortable with. It doesn't. How many houses have only one bedroom, one bathroom? And yet this is said, it's like a dorm. Basically, it has to be shared bathroom facilities, but I don't know if 3 units can share one or all 6 have to share one. It doesn't sound attractive to me, but that's the way it's listed right now. I have a feeling that some of these over time will be modified. And, but those are the 2 that are required as part of this House bill. All the other requirements in there are for communities larger than 2,500. So that really limits the effect of this bill on Gold Hill at this time. And I have to be careful in saying that because until July 1 rolls around, there's still legislation being discussed. They're getting really close to the point where they can't vote on anything more, but they keep talking about requiring some of these standards for the smaller communities too. So we'll keep an eye out on that. There's supposed to be a model code that first was supposed to be provided in June of this year. And now they have deferred that to June of next year. So at that point, when the state has decided all of this for this particular period, they will provide a model code that communities can use to do further updates. Fortunately, they'll provide funding to do that. My work on this is funded through another program, so it's not costing the city for my work. So that's what's required in House Bill 3395. All of the other changes are a result of just our review of the code. One of them was that we've got this ordinance 1302, which was for low impact development standards. It's a code that was already adopted by the city And so all we've been doing is incorporating that into the Title 17. And it should be, I think there's some parts of 16 as well. None of it is new language. It's just being brought into the code. So many of the pages of the document you received are relating to that section. Because every time you change something, it changes numbers. There'll be one little statement that needs to be inserted in each chapter, and it just adds a lot of verbiage to the code. And then there is one section that is related directly to that, that's there as well. Another area that we had an issue with was with manufactured dwellings. That was updated, I think in 2022, 2023, when the last code updates were done here. The problem was it failed to eliminate some of the old standards. And the main thing that the state has changed now is to not allow communities to provide any additional standards for manufactured dwellings than would be required for any other single-family dwelling. The primary change is in size. For most communities, the way the state language was written, it said communities may adopt this list of standards. Most of the communities I was involved with and throughout the state adopted that list of standards. And the first standard was that a unit had to be at least 1,000 square feet. That is no longer a requirement. And when you look at some of the trends, they're to smaller housing units rather than larger. And so it was almost discriminatory against manufactured dwellings to have these additional standards. So that the only standards that are allowed now are for being consistent with other dwellings. And then the big one locally is the change to the mobile food vendor. That's in section 17.65.010. And I think that's on pages 83 and 84. The main shift there, again, is to make temporary event-oriented mobile food vendors just something that's handled through a business license rather than having to go through a hearing. It's not practical to go through a 2-month preparation for a hearing to sell food for 3 days at a fair or a festival or something of that type. That's the main change that is occurring in there, is to make it so that that particular kind of use is exempt and leaves the standards to like the mobile food vendors who are on individual parcels on a more permanent basis, even though they're called temporary. So that's the bulk of what we're looking at. And there are conclusions of law and findings of fact that need to be provided. And section 17.84010 does provide for text amendments when the public necessity and convenience and the general welfare require such an amendment, as outlined in 17.84010. And then the criteria are that one, if the proposal involves an amendment to the comp plan, the amendment must be consistent with the statewide planning goals and relevant Oregon administrative rules. We are not looking at a comprehensive plan amendment in this. We are only looking at changes to the land development standards. So therefore, that one does not apply. But there is still a need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And our finding is basically that these standards are consistent with the need to periodically update a plan. And they acknowledge the need for regular updates. Then the city council must find that the proposal is in the public interest with regard to community conditions. The proposal either responds to changes in the community or it corrects a mistake or inconsistency in the subject plan or code. That's the main finding that we've been making in this case, that we're updating to comply with various rules, as well as correcting mistakes or inconsistencies in the code. And then finally, that it must conform to the transportation planning rule. And the only particular section where you would expect that to happen is when you're increasing densities or changing the use of something. But in the one area where we're looking at a change of use to allow that residential occupancy of commercial dwellings, the House bill specifically states that the government cannot, or is not required to consider whether the amendments significantly affect an existing or planned transportation facility. So in that case, the finding is that it's not applicable in this particular case. So staff is comfortable with the proposed changes in the packet, and we recommend that you recommend approval to the city council. Are there questions at this point? And then we can get into the details.
And the minimum size is in conflict with CCNR.
That becomes tough. Typically, a CCNR can be more restrictive than a code, but it cannot be. Well, let's see, no, it can be less restrictive. You can't, this is, I'm rusty. 6 years, so, because that is a very good question. My understanding of CCNRs is, you can, I'm looking at like requiring additional setbacks. If it was a 5-foot setback, you could require 10. If it was a 10-foot setback, your CCNRs could not allow 5. You couldn't go against the rules. In parcel sizes,
Dwelling,
dwelling size.
Talk into the mic though. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, where we require a dwelling to be larger than what you would want, or you would want a larger dwelling.
there's a subdivision in this town that has a 1,500 square foot minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So, but says this is now 1,000 will be permissible. So what happens there?
And what I was speaking in the 1,000 was relating to the manufactured dwellings. So that if, and I don't know that there is a size established for structures in Gold Hill. There is for mobile homes, and that the purpose of removing the 1,000 square feet is just to make it consistent with everything else. Yeah,
May I offer one other? So with the multifamily, if there was a 1,500 square foot requirement, if it was a multi-unit, it still could meet the 1,500 square foot as a single building, just in multiple units.
and there are changes or provisions for the size of individual units in multifamily. There have been ordinances in the past that have required a minimum number of square feet per unit. I don't know if they go to maximum. Where it becomes an issue is when we're talking about density of development. If we're required to have 12 units on an acre, that has to be arranged somehow. And we don't have that in here with what we're doing right now. I'm not looking at any changes of parcel size or even structure size now. The main thing is that, except with respect to the mobile homes, needing to have that 1,000 square foot requirement taken away. Yeah, that's a very good question though, because it comes up in most communities.
I just had one more clarification, on the bottom of page 1 of your staff report. Incorporate ordinance 1302 into the municipal code. I just want to make a point that that's an ordinance that's already been approved by council. And it just has not been put into the code. So this is actually going to incorporate that language from that ordinance into the code.
Right. The desire is to have all of the regulations in one spot, and we haven't had that. But it's really not discussable because it's already adopted. It just is a filler for the size of the document. So I would not expect much, if any, conversation about that.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So as the House Bill 3395 under the staff report, section 2 states that the provisions that would apply to us are simply the residential structures in general commercial, not the downtown zone.
Thank you for mentioning that. The reason that that's only general commercial is that your downtown zone does permit some industrial uses. And the House bill I didn't write it here, but I know that it does say that it does allow or require this only in commercial zones that do not also allow some industrial use. I was kind of surprised to see in the downtown zone that there's a couple of like one or two references to industrial. And because of that, I actually had it in there before and then I took it out because of that provision. I'll find the actual statement here. Just so that you have it. I've brought all my background material just to find stuff like that. That basically was saying that cities are not required to include it. I think it may be a topic for later discussion, because you may say that, I think what they were intending with that is that if you had an industrial use near residential, they often do shift work. They'll work overnight. They might make noise that would be bothersome to people who are living there. I don't know that we have anything like that in the zone at this point, that it is permitted. It's one of the permitted uses. So that's why the change is there. So it actually ended up being a significantly less effect than I thought we would have, because it relates only to the general commercial zone.
And then the other portion of that is just confirming that all the other portions of House Bill 3395, because they do not apply to the populations under 2,500, they're not included in the code changes at this time. So we're not
Right.
putting them in with something that says this doesn't apply. It's not being added at this time.
Correct. There is a provision that says that if a community wants to, they can add some of the, particularly relating to multiple unit dwellings in single family zones. If you're a community larger than 10,000, and some will say larger than 25,000, you have to include them in your residential zones. But in smaller communities, you do not. In all the provisions, it says if you want to, you can. I backed away from it at this point because of the city's infrastructure questions. Until you have a really strong infrastructure, I think it would be difficult to show that we're not having an adverse effect on utilities.
Any other questions?
I had a question on the change in the maximum lot coverage, page 45.
Yes.
Was that part of the House bill, or is that?
No, that is
that's
not
just
part of the
a
House bill.
mistake that's already,
I'm kind of sorry you brought that up.
sorry.
But because I looked at that and thought what that came from was the low impact development. And I think it's actually a little bit inconsistent with what the state wants. It wants increased coverage,
Okay.
and this backed away from that. And I would say if you want us to either retain what we had, that's to me a valid thing. This code was adopted back in 2012 or 2013. Things change. That's very perceptive. That was one that I should have brought that up, because it does change what we have now, and it would probably be better to leave it where it is, because some of the update code language is wanting to increase coverage. You end up kind of losing open space, and that was the problem with the low impact development. They wanted more open space rather than less, but it is consistent with this particular new language. That's a good discussion.
Clarifying question regarding that.
Mhm.
So this whole portion about lot coverage bonus, would that also need to be addressed? I would counter that even though we're changing this technically right now in the code language, it was already adopted by the council back in 2012 or 13, whenever that was. So if these changes would be recommended to change, I think the language wouldn't be as to say not to change them, because they are officially changed. It just didn't get entered in. It would be to recommend they go back to what they were prior to, revert to before this change would be the recommendation to the council. Because the numbers in blue are what the council adopted back in 12 or 13.
They are. And I'm comfortable with that if you do, because it's more consistent with the new language to have more coverage rather than less. So I thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is one that I have not identified as a change, but you have the authority all the way through here to make recommendations that we hadn't identified. But yeah,
So that would need to be, when it comes time after public testimony.
Mhm.
After that, this would be, if this is something the commission wanted to revert to the previous, that it'd be a motion to change this to the numbers prior to the adoption of that ordinance.
Right.
Then that would go back to the council if adopted tonight or recommended tonight for the council to actually put in an ordinance to adopt at a later time.
Correct.
So it wouldn't change it in the code. You're changing the recommendation back to the council for that code change language.
Yeah, and then they would make that change. And that coupled with the density or the coverage bonus, I think gets it back closer to what the new legislation is wanting. That allows an increase in the density. So I think that would be good to do that.
Lily, can I ask a question just for clarity?
Only if you speak better into the mic.
Can I ask a question just for better clarity? When we did Title 17, that was just, Mark, wasn't that just like 4 years ago? 3 years ago?
2.5, 3.
Yeah,
Relatively recent.
Finding a lot of things got missed.
okay, that's why I'm bringing it up
Yep.
to find out.
It wasn't complete. Things got missed and huge sections of the code just got dropped off that had not been talked about or discussed and were not meant to be taken out. So, to be clear, municipal code has not been updated since 2004. So every ordinance in the last 21 years that has passed and changed the law intending to change the code has not actually been codified. And what codified means is you put it in the language into the code. So it's law, and we just have to go back to those ordinances to see what the current law is. But actually updating the verbiage of the code hasn't happened. That's what one of this portions is on this maximum lot coverage, something that already previously was adopted, but it didn't get changed in the verbiage. So this is updating the verbiage for those law changes that already occurred.
Thank you.
So Dick, a question would be on those lot coverages, is that the old numbers? Is that more consistent with current, what a lot of municipalities are doing? Or
It's closer. I would have to go back to the actual statutes. There've been so many House bills I've been reviewing to see what they have. But actually during the discussion, I can be looking in the 3395 to see if they've identified specific numbers that are different from these. I think they are higher. One thing I didn't mention is that we have talked about a minor change, an important change to Title 16, and that is with respect to property line adjustments. They're not listed. They just weren't, somehow they were omitted over the years. And when I was working here, I don't recall having an issue with that. Maybe we didn't have a single one in the 22 years I was working with you. But so I just borrowed the language from Phoenix. It's just a very standard property line adjustment language. And so you have that identified in the staff report or in the exhibit A.
So the items in blue are what you're clarifying?
I couldn't hear you, so I don't think others could either.
The items. Fine.
The language, I think that first part, the land divisions is, they're talking about shared access. I think that's still borrowed from the low impact development code.
So Blue's new language crossed
Yes.
out is removing.
Correct. And chapter 1634 is the specific property line adjustment amendment or standards.
any other questions? Okay, at this time, we'll entertain public testimony. We'll now call on those who wish to testify in support of the application.
I had a question about that. What if somebody is neutral? Which category do they fall under? Or do we just, okay. We only have one person signed up to testify, and we did not have a category on our form is whether they support, oppose, or were neutral. So with that, we can call Charles Johnson to testify, and he can advise if he was in support, opposed, or neutral.
Sure.
Well, don't talk till you're at the mic, please. Okay. Can you?
Thank you. I mean that too, by the way. Each and every one of you. I've give you a little of my history. I've lived here since 1975.
except for a 3-year stint in Idaho. We've lived here the whole time and in the same house since 1977, and that's my neighbor over there. And he's a good guy, and so is she. With that said, and I have to apologize to each and every one of you, I have not done my homework on this at all, so I don't know what side of the ledger I'm on. I will tell you, back in 1988, I was on the planning commission. I was they called me the president of it at that time. I stayed on for a year and I learned one thing. Half the town, when you make a decision on something, love you and the other half hate you. And then a month later, you turn around and you make a decision on something else and the half that went along with you hate your guts and the other half think you're the best thing since bubblegum. And I don't know if you guys are experiencing that, but that was my experience. And, but anyway, I was also involved with the LCDC. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Is that applicable here within the laws? And understand, I don't know what I'm doing here. It's been 40 years since I've been on the planning commission. So just, I'm asking a serious question. Is LCDC involved? Land Conservation and Development Corporation, are they involved anymore? Okay. Okay, not from the county, but from Salem. Okay.
They're going to have an agency of housing and production.
Housing and Production Office.
And they're stated statewide, rural communities, that's all other jurisdictions. And assuring that there's an adequate amount of power. It sounds more, so what if better are positive than any other agency output that I've seen? I talked to them specifically last week at a meeting.
Okay.
I listened to one, so community, and it does sound like they're interested in helping.
Okay.
Our community from going to what you're supposed to do and like that.
Right.
So Dick, just to clarify, confirming in the future, if somebody went through a land use process that got appealed through LUBA or a challenge, would the Land Development Conservation or the Department of, would they be involved at that time? Is that to clarify that? Okay.
Right.
The reason I had a little bit with it is that me, because I was asking the question that I thought we make it to the two topics. They said, no, that's goal here, this is a LCDC goal on town. They said, well, we're separate. So they're trying to kind of go on side and twist the city side of the.
Well, okay, just my observation, since I've been here, I learned something very valuable, and they have, sounds like they've set a kind of a parameter of 2,500 population or above, but they also said, well, that's for right now. And that sure sounds like I hate to say it, but it sounds like a government foot in the door, so to speak, that they've interjected that in for maybe a later time. And it has me a little bit nervous because we are a very, very small town. We're the third smallest populated town in all of Jackson County. I don't know if you folks know that, but it's to bring in this type of development, I think we're going to start to lose our livability, our charm, and our character of this town. And believe it or not, a lot of people probably say Gold Hill doesn't have a livability or a charm or a character. It does. And to bring in development that this proposal or this ordinance, it's not even an ordinance, it's a House bill, right? 3395. I see something, that's the reason why I'm here, because I just don't come to these meetings, but this one scared me when I saw it. And I'm still, the jury's out in my head, whether it's good or bad, but it's got some of the earmarks that disturb me. And I'm just saying right now, I'm looking at what I'm I'm looking at, we are so far under that 2,500. We're at 1,200, as I understand approximately right now. Is that close? Okay, in that area. So right now, you know, this minimum, we're 2 times under that. So we should, I would assume, be okay. But we'll wait and see on that one. And everything's being generated by Salem. It's not coming out of Jackson County at all, correct? I mean, are they adding
Remember-
any?
Time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay.
And if I could reply to one thing that, I was involved kind of in college in 1973, when Senate Bill 100 was done, and they started with the goals and guidelines. So that's the reason I'm saying, right now, it's clearly, we're exempt from most of the,
Okay.
you know, but I have, in my life, I've seen not learned from that.
Okay.
So we have to limit comments to roughly 3 minutes.
I just want a couple more things real quickly for my benefit, and then the next
Okay.
time we're going to address is in the city council, not in the planning commission, correct?
Yeah.
And that's coming up, what, next Monday or the first Monday of the month, or? I'll
It's
keep
yet
an
to
eye-
be scheduled.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only thing I do want to say is also is who would be, I'm assuming that these aren't contractors that are initiating, let's say, for instance, we're 2,500 people. They want to start bringing in housing for low income and so forth. And would this expense be generated by the citizens of Gold Hill? Or is it going to be generated by the federal government to bring more people to disperse throughout the state? Or how does this, anybody looked into that, how that's going to happen? And the reason why I'm saying this, and it sounds a little political, but I think right now, being that we're a sanctuary state, I don't think we're going to get a lot of help from the federal government. So when you guys are listening to this stuff, not from me, but I mean, from making decisions in regards to the future, we need to think about that, because we may not have the support. of the
We
federal government.
can't really answer that at this
I'm
point.
not saying
so,
you should.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, consider that.
yeah.
And,
Okay.
And that is providing funding to the state for particularly helping communities.
so it's going to be coming out of, so it's, okay. But it's still, even though we're living in a small town, it may not be directly applicable to us having to do anything structurally. We're still taxpayers. And for that reason, we're still dealing with a sanctuary state situation, which means we may not get any help from the federal government. That's it. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Final staff comments. Does the staff have any closing comments?
So I think we're saying at this point that reverting to the old coverages, that density goal, I feel with it.
Okay.
At this time, we will now close the public testimony portion of the hearing and commissioners can deliberate. So we have some options in front of us. We've got a couple options. Actually, Dick there was a list of 6. Yeah, there was a list of 6 of them here.
If you'd like me to go over the options.
Basically, you can recommend approval conditions. Typically, you don't do that in legislative. However, if you want to add that provision, housing that can be added to the motion. You could table it or continue it to a time of certain, or you could there were a couple of provisions that they're talking about
I thought the direction today was to increase or increase, I'm sorry, lot coverage by make more use of available land. It's apparently another. The reduction does, I think, especially for, duplexes, which one thing that was case to the total process was the duplexes would have to that's not a requirement that it's under the city on. Yeah, so in one sense, on finding a part of that house bill beyond what the size of the city. Correct. And if you're doing duplexes, it talks about number of units, accessory dwelling units, things like that. You typically do have more. So,
I thought I'd throw it back up there if you had a question about it. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, do you feel there's a benefit to reverting back to the old?
I believe so. I mean, maybe Lily, you could speak to the average parcel size in our community, but my gut reaction, that feeling is that we have a lot of small parcels that I'd be curious to see what the average lot coverage and those would be. And again, with the intent of, you know, allowing accessory dwellings and some of these other development, I think that
David, you got to speak into that microphone. If you lean back, you got to take that mic with you. Sorry. Just so you know, the online recording is actually transcribing. So if they can't hear you in the microphone.
I know, I'm sitting there, okay? Yes. All I said was, you'd have a tough time putting an accessory dwelling on a lot of these lots in town because they're so small.
And Mike, since you asked me, I would say the one that caught my attention that it impacts me as a city is that public land is limited to 90%. And so that would impact our parks, that would impact City Hall here, where other than the strip of grass out front is completely covered in either asphalt or a building. And so that is curious to me about it limiting public land use as well. Okay, so in this case, it's not paving. Yeah.
in my understanding, in some communities like decks, patios, all that counts towards lot coverage. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. Mm.
So do we, is there a motion, and if so, if we want to revert those lot coverages, is there a motion, to recommend approval to the council of as presented in the staff report?
I would like to make a motion to revert to the original, or not original, but the previous maximum lot coverage percentages.
And
So he can do it individually. You guys can vote on that as an amendment.
Okay.
And then the next motion, if you do it individually, could be recommend approval or recommendation of approval as amended to the council is how the second motion would be there.
yeah, let's do that.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
Well, so let me clarify. You can make a motion right now to say, we recommend approval as presented by the staff with the amendment of reverting the maximum lot coverage to the portion before 2012.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, so to clarify, that's the motion you're wanting to make.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that you're recommending, so, and then is that the second that you
Yeah,
thought you were, okay.
is.
So to clarify, Chair, is that good with you?
Yes,
Okay,
so that's all in one motion.
so you don't have to do two that way.
Correct.
Okay,
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Chair Warwick,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammond,
Yes.
Commissioner Lilly,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, the next regularly scheduled planning commission meeting will be July, I believe, 17th. Is that correct?
actually, we now are under the new rules that say we can meet quarterly as needed. So unless there is something, I would say no. And, we will let you know after conferring with the chair as things come up when the next meeting will be.
Okay. So the next meeting date is to be determined.
Correct.
Okay. At this time, we'll now close the public hearing at 6:50 PM.
And I will do some more research on the lot coverage, because I know it's discussed in other places. I think it has to do with barriers to housing, and sometimes the lot coverage is a barrier. And this is round one, because once the model code comes out, there'll be opportunity to look at additional standards too, and that may be one. As you test your waters here, that it makes sense to increase that coverage even more.
So will you adjourn the meeting now? He closed the hearing.
Close the hearing.